What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another episode of Bleeding BNG. I think this might be our first non-live episode that we've done since the season has ended. So, hey guys, welcome back. Gearing up for the 2025 season. To give you a time step as I do for all of my episodes, today is Sunday, February the 23rd, 2025. And we're at the beginning of the week where the actual NFL Combine starts, and we're about 2.5 weeks away from the start of NFL free agency. So we're right in the thick of, the NFL all season, even though the league year hasn't started yet. I think a couple of days ago was actually the day that teams can start to anoint players under their franchise tag. So out with the 2024 season. While it was an amazing ride, it's over and done with, and we gotta recalibrate, as my man Dan Quinn would say, to conquer this 2025 season and gear up for the 2025 journey. So with that being said, I actually had an episode that I wanted to do for you guys today where I'm going to be ranking the 5 biggest needs for our Washington Commanders going into the 2025 season. But before I get too deep into this video, you already know what I'm going to say. Be sure to comment, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe. On the road to 3,000 subscribers, and I can't do it without your help. As I've said before, thank you guys for an amazing 2024 season. But I'm expecting the 2025 season to be even better. We go even more viral. We get even more traction. Because I need that plaque from YouTube. I need that plaque from YouTube soon come, and I know I can do it with the help of you guys. But enough of me going on my soapbox. Like I said, today's episode is us ranking the 5 biggest needs for the Washington Commanders this offseason. And the reason that I wanted to do this video is because I've noticed a lot of variance. I noticed a lot of variance in our community on what we actually need this offseason. There's been everybody has talked about us having to improve at about 21 positions outside of the quarterback. It's like we could get better at wide receiver 1. We can get back to cornerback 1. And I get it. Like we're coming off of one of our best seasons of all time, and we're so calibrated and so programmed to think that we need a roster overhaul each and every offseason. And that's been ebb and flow for the course of my almost 30 years as a Washington fan. But we also have about 30 players that aren't signed to contracts throughout this past season and are going into the free agency. I think we got about 27 players under contract. So we do need to make a couple of moves, and we do have a lot of cap space, even with the cap space jumping last week. I think it went about $10 million more projected than it was prior to that news briefing coming out last week. So we're one of the franchises that have the most money to spend in free agency. But we got a lot of guys from our roster last year from the 2024 Commanders that we need to make decisions on as well. So whether that be supplemented through the draft, whether that be swinging for the fences in free agency, or whether that be making little swings and giving out another slew of one-year deals like we did last offseason to try to compete this offseason. I can see Adam Peters going many which ways for the 2025 offseason, if I'm being 100% honest. But my motto, my approach that I'm taking going into this free agency, or going into this offseason, is let Adam cook. Let Adam cook. He's shown us, and he has a track record of us having the ultimate faith in him. Like, we have no reason not to have the ultimate faith in him. I know it's only been a year, but if you look at his work that he did in New England, if you look at his work that he did with the Broncos and with the San Francisco 49ers, I don't see why you have any trepidations in letting Adam Peters cook. We finally have a competent GM in Washington, and it's time to, let that man do his job. Let that man do his job. And that's my motto for the 2025 offseason. Because if you would have told me some of the deals and some of the players that he signed to last year, like a Austin Eckler or like a Zach Ertz, would have had the impact that they did during the 2024 season before that offseason, I would have told you that you were crazy. I would have told you you were crazy, but guess what? That's why I have a podcast mic in front of me, and I'm not an NFL GM, even though I feel like I know a little bit of ball over here at Bleeding BNG. But you come to Bleeding BNG for the most raw, uncut, and unfiltered analysis on your Washington Commanders. And while I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I noticed a lot of variance throughout the community on what positions and what players and what things on the roster that we need to improve on. You would have thought that we had this bare bones roster. You would have thought that it was damn near impossible to get to the NFC Championship like you did with the way some of you guys in the community talk about this roster. And I totally understand it because it's not like we have, a Philadelphia Eagles or a Baltimore Ravens roster where they're stacked 1 through 53. But we do have the ultimate X factor, and that's that guy right there on that back wall, right there. JD5 coming live. That guy right here on my shirt. The amount of Jalen Daniels merch I got right now is crazy. It's insane. But guess what? That's what you do when you get the greatest quarterback in your franchise's history since you've been a fan at least. It's like I got 30 years of built up savings, built up money that I should have been spending on merch in years past, but I was too ashamed to because my team was ass. Well, guess what? I'm going to spend it all now on the Washington Commanders and Jalen Daniels. But enough of me rambling, man. Let's get into the purpose of today's episode. And like I said, I'm getting into Bleeding B&Gs. This is our opinion and our opinion only. Feel free to comment in the chat and let us know what you think about our list. And also tell us what you think our biggest needs are for the Washington Commanders and how you think we should address it going into the 2025 offseason. Now, this is not our mock free agency episode where we predict some of the signings and some of the moves that we're going to make going into free agency. That's going to come a couple of weeks down the line. That's going to come right before the new league year starts. So make sure that's another reason you should hit the subscribe button to make sure that you don't miss any of that content. Because we struck gold last year. If you guys can remember, if you guys have been Bleeding B&G supporters for a while now, we actually called the Jeremy Chin and the Bobby Wagner signings way before they happened in our 2024 mock offseason episode where we put on the hat of Adam Peters and we played. I was the black Adam Peters for the day playing Washington Commanders GM last year. And it seems like, great minds think alike because me and Adam was on the same page. Or he watched my YouTube video, one or the other. But without further ado, this is not our mock free agency episode. This is just me spewing out a couple of names, a couple of positions that I think are the biggest needs for the 2025 Washington Commanders going into the off season. So we're going to go in decrescendo order. So we're going to start actually with the honorable mention list, and then we're going to go 5 to 1, and then I'm going to get you guys on with your day. So another approach that I had outside of letting Adam Peters cook into the 2025 offseason, and you guys might have heard me say this if you guys have checked out our lives, but you're going to hear me say this for the rest of the offseason if I'm being 100% honest with you. And that theme and that motto is I'm doing whatever it takes to compete with the Philadelphia Eagles. The reigning Super Bowl champions, the defending Super Bowl champions. And guess what? They're not leaving our division anytime soon. Yeah, we had an amazing season, but they're still king of the hill in that division. And I'm going into the 2025 offseason doing everything that I can to compete with that dominant roster. I can think that Jaden Daniels is better than Jalen Hurts, and I can howl at to the cows come over the moon, right? But it's still a team sport at the end of the game. And I truly believe, and if you're a Philadelphia Eagle fan watching this, you might be shocked to hear me say this, but I do truly believe that the Philadelphia Eagles have the best roster 1 through 53 in the entire NFL. I don't even think that's a hot take, and I don't even think that's necessarily that close. And I know a lot of the talk since the Eagles, their dominant playoff run, their dominant Super Bowl performance has been talking about the trenches, building up on the trenches. And while I do agree with that, with my approach, I'm not pigeonholing myself into a position, into a certain, roster group that I need to, draft to compete with them. I just have the Philadelphia Eagles in mind. Because guess what? Yeah, they have elite trench play, but they have elite skill position players as well. So I'm doing whatever it takes to compete with the Philadelphia Eagles because I firmly believe that their roster is so dominant, 1 through 53, that if you can compete with them, everybody else is going to fall by the wayside. Everybody else is going to fall by the wayside. And I need to hurry up and get into this list because it sounds like I'm glazing the shit out of the Philadelphia Eagles. But I truly believe that. But without further ado, man, let's get into this list. So the honorable mentions, the positions that just missed the cut on being of Bleeding B&G's top five, or Bleeding B&G's belief of the top five biggest needs for the Washington Commanders this season, was the cornerback position and the offensive tackle position. Now, do I think that we can improve on these positions? Absolutely. Marshawn Lattimore, to be quite frank, had a nightmare tenure of a 4 or 5 game stint after we bought him in after the trade deadline. He did not look like the Marshawn Lattimore of the past. He looked a little washed, to be 100% honest with you. Now, does that have to do with him recovering from a hamstring injury that he was dealing with since the beginning of the year? That hamstring injury that kept him out a lot of those initial games when he first was traded for it, then kept him out after he played a little bit and he was trying to come back. And it showed. He looked like a guy playing out there on one leg, going up against elite talents like A.J. Brown and Mike Evans. But I'm not here to ring the alarm just yet. And this is one of the reasons why, even though I do think that we can improve at the cornerback position, I don't think that it's in our top 5 list of needs. Because if you go back and look at some of our passing, say within the top 10 of, giving up passing yardage as a passing defense throughout the entire season. And that's with piss poor defensive line play. That's with us having to manufacture, pressure on the quarterback and things of that nature. And I know the cornerback position as well as the safety positions are positions that, we tend to, stress over in the Washington community, and rightfully so, because we've had horrible DBs since I've been a fan of the Washington Commanders, thinking of Bakari Rambo, Phillip Thomas, Chris Culliver, and the list goes on and on. But, I don't think that, Marshawn Lattimore needs to be mentioned amongst those names just yet, even though he did look like those guys during the playoff run and during his short tenure as a Washington Commander player. I know a couple of people have talked about cutting bait with him because it saves you in like $18 million in cap relief. No, I don't want to necessarily do that because we did give up a lot for him at the trade deadline. So I do want to exhaust all avenues that we have for this asset. But I mean, I'll be lying if I said that I'm not a little skeptical of, Marshawn Lattimore going into the 2025 season. But another reason why cornerback isn't as high on my list of needs is that I know that, the term has been thrown around very loosely with Mikey Sainristil, is that his natural position, quote unquote, is a nickel cornerback. But this is a guy that's been playing, he was playing wide receiver 3 years ago, right? So we don't necessarily know what his natural position is. This is a guy that seems like any position can be his natural position when he spends some time there. And while I do think that he might be best suited at a nickel cornerback position due to some of the physical limitations that he has, he showed you last year that he's going to compete his ass off if he's out there on the boundary. And with Noah Igbenogany having a strong season as our slot corner, as our nickel corner defender, I don't think that the cornerback position is necessarily that high up on the list. As I started off my point saying, can we improve on there? Absolutely. Is it in our top 5 biggest needs? I don't necessarily think so. Same thing with tackle. Can we improve over Andrew Wiley and Brandon Coleman? Absolutely. But I think that, Adam Peters wants to give himself time to prove himself right, that he found a diamond in the rough as with a 3rd round draft pick, turning into a starting left tackle in Brandon Coleman. And Brandon Coleman, while his play started to teeter off towards the second half of the season, I do think that he started to hit a rookie wall. He was just a tick under dominant early in the season. Like, this is a guy that held Myles Garrett to the same amount of stats as me when they played the Cleveland Browns. Like, he was statless, not sackless. He was statless. He didn't record a tackle for loss, and a lot of that was doing to Brandon Coleman. And Brandon Coleman was pretty strong, even missing an entire training camp. So imagine what he can do with an entire training camp, coming back, hitting the ground running with a full offseason, with a full year in the Washington Commanders, off-season training program. And I do think that we can improve over Andrew Wiley, right? Y'all know, I ain't going. If you a If you've watched any of my videos, y'all know we are not Andrew Wiley fans over here, so I'm not going to sit here in front and do a 180 and act like Andrew Wiley is that guy. But I think being a right tackle for Jaden Daniels can be one of the easiest positions in sports, and specifically a right tackle because he sees a lot of the pressure that's coming because he's a right-handed dominant quarterback. And with him being as slick as fucking motor oil, he can avoid a lot of that pressure, even though it's coming. If you look at some of Andrew Wiley's, pressure numbers and pass protection numbers this year, they look rather good. But I think that that's skewed because Jaden Daniels is his quarterback. So while I do think that we can improve on Andrew Wiley and especially in the run game, I don't think that it's necessarily dire that we make that improvement, and that's the reason why it didn't make my top 5. So those are the 2 positions that made the honorable mention in the cornerback and the tackle position. Now let's get into the list. At number 5 is wide receiver. If you would have talked to me in September and October at the beginning of the season, wide receiver might have been at number 1 on this list. It might have been at the top of this list. But one of the reasons why, it's kind of trickled down to the bottom of this list, while still staying on this list, is that Jaden Daniels has shown that he has the capability of winning with anybody, right? We went into the season questioning who our wide receiver 2 was going to be. Then it ultimately ended up being a guy that was bought in off waivers a week before the season in Noah Brown. And then Noah Brown goes down in December. And then that's when Olamide Zaccheaus, who had 10 catches in 2023, and De'Ami Brown, who's been a bust of a third-round draft pick, started to pick it up simply because they have that elite quarterback, right? And this is one of the reasons why it's not higher on my list, because I don't think you necessarily need to go get a big name to supplement that wide receiver room. One of the reasons it did make this list, though, is because I believe we only have 2 wide receivers under contract that were in that wide receiver room last year, in Luke McCaffrey and Terry McLaurin. De'Ami Brown's a free agent. Jamison Crowder's a free agent. Olamide Zaccheaus is a free agent. So we're going to have to supplement that room with somebody, right? Now, while I would love to bring a couple of guys back, I don't know if De'Ami Brown has necessarily priced himself out of being a Washington Commander with his playoff performance. But I think that a guy like Olamide Zaccheaus can be brought back. I think that Noah Brown can be brought back if you want to bring a guy like Noah Brown in as well. Some names that we can look at, because while I don't think that we're going to be at the top of the market entertaining guys like T. Higgins, who I ultimately think is going to end up playing under a franchise tag with the Cincinnati Bengals for another year, you can start to entertain the likes of like N'Keal Westbrook-Ikine from the Tennessee Titans, who was a touchdown merchant last year, or a guy like Cooper Kupp, who the LA Rams have already said that they're looking to trade, or a guy like Hollywood Brown and Christian Kirk. Both of those guys respectively have experience playing in the Cliff Kingsbury offense, with them being former Arizona Cardinals. These are guys that can fill in that wide receiver 2 by committee role that we were, rolling out the Rolodex with this year. We didn't necessarily have a shoe-in wide receiver 2, especially after Noah Brown went down. But that didn't stop the offense from still putting 30-plus points up, and Jaden Daniels setting historic rates and producing at a historic pace for NFL rookie quarterback. And that was with, as I said, Noah Brown, De'Ami Brown, and I think all the guys that I mentioned just now, all of those guys will be an improvement over the wide receiver 2s and 3s that we had last season. So, that's why it's not as high on my list, because I don't think it's the most pressing issue for our Washington Commanders, but it's an issue nonetheless. So we do need to supplement ourselves at the wide receiver position, thus it being number 5 on my list. Number 4. Now, like I said, this is Bleeding Me and G's list. In the comments, let me know if y'all agree with my list. Let me know if y'all would exchange some positions off of my list. If I would put some positions on my list, because I promise you this list is going to get a little spicy as we get closer and closer to number 1. But number 4 is the defensive tackle position. Number 4 is the defensive tackle position. And some of you guys watching might be questioning why that's not number 1, because our run defense is probably our biggest issue in the 2024 season. I will admit that. I admit that wholeheartedly. I get it, right? But the reason that is number 4 on this list and not number 1 is because we did draft Johnny Newton with a high draft pick. He was a day 2 pick. He was, a high second round draft pick last year, right? So he's projected to make a jump. And a lot of people were calling him the steal of the draft, projected him to go in the first round. And while I do think that he had a disappointing and didn't necessarily live to his draft pedigree in his rookie year, I will admit that coming off of 2 Jones fracture surgeries in one offseason for a big dude that's near 300 pounds can be challenging to recover from and play a full season on. But I need to see a jump from Johnny Newton in year 2. I need to see a jump from Johnny Newton in year 2. And I personally don't think that we can move off Deron Payne's contract, even though I so desperately want to. I would not mind if Deron Payne was not on this team anymore, to be 100% honest with you, because I think he kind of had a facade of a season in 2022 during that contract year to get the bag, and kind of has checked out on us a little bit. And it ain't got nothing to do with the stats or anything like that. Deron Payne was pushed off in the run game way easier than I've seen him in his 7-year career in the NFL this past season. So the reason that no defensive tackle isn't higher on the list is because we got a lot of assets and a lot of shit allocated to that room already. Like, somebody need to make a jump. Somebody need to tuck their nuts, put on their big boy pants, and become the player that we was expecting them to be when we drafted him. Old regime or new, Deron Payne or Johnny Newton. Like, if you're looking, these guys should be essentially your 2 starters next year going into the 2025 season, no matter what we do in the draft. Based off of the assets and the allocation that we spending on these guys. That's why I'm not really fond of, spending a pick on a defensive tackle at 29 with the first pick in the draft. Yeah, one of those reasons that the defensive tackle class is loaded. It is loaded. But, we just spent that high draft pick asset last year on Johnny Newton. We got 2 first-rounders in the room right now. And while I do think it's more likely than not that we cut bait with John Allen, unless he restructures his contract, no. I'm not spending my highest draft asset, spending a lucrative contract on guys that I've already been there, done that with in that room. It's time for them dudes to become the players that we drafted them to be, that we paid them to be. And that's why defensive tackle is number 4 on this list and not number 1. Yeah, the run defense got to improve. I get it. But I don't necessarily think that's the most pressing issue on the Washington Commanders roster. So let's move into number 3. Number 3 on this list is interior offensive line. I honestly think that has to both guard positions, and depending on Tyler Biadasz's health, because I think that he was injured a lot of the second half of the season, we could entertain some depth pieces at center as well. But both guard positions need to be looked at. One with Sam Cosmi's injury, being that he was injured in the divisional round of the playoffs, and being that I don't expect him to be ready at the start of the season. But I think that Sam Cosmi's play did regress before his injury. He was not the Sam Cosmi in 2023, and I'm not really sure why his play regressed, because he still should be in his prime, being that he's only 25. I think he might have turned 26 last week, 26 years old. So he still should be in his athletic prime. So I don't necessarily understand why his play regressed. Might be a new scheme thing. But we need to be looking at that left guard position, because Nick Allegretti struggled mightily, especially in the second half of the season. Nick Allegretti, I think he's a fine depth piece. I don't know if you want him starting. I see why he didn't start for the Kansas City Chiefs. A Super Bowl caliber roster, a Super Bowl caliber organization. And while I shout out to Adam Peters for giving him a chance, it's time that we upgrade that position, because and I'm gonna touch on the run game as we get later down in the list as well. But there weren't many holes. There weren't many holes being created in the run game over the second half of the season. Now, were there some? Absolutely. But it wasn't anything of the dominant nature. And that's what we got to be if we want to compete with the defensive line and the offensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles, and specifically the interior offensive line, because the Philadelphia Eagles out there trying out Jalen Carter. The New York Giants out there trying out DeMarcus Lawrence. All these guys giving pressure to Jalen Daniels up the gap throughout the A gap, interior pressure. And we're seeing that's what flusters quarterbacks the most. You can step up in the pocket with an elite edge rusher that's beating your tackle time and time again. But you stepping up in the middle of the interior line, you're running into a brick wall. And we got to get some dudes that can combat that. Not only in the run game, but in the pass game as well, because you got these demons. Like Dexter Lawrence had 10 sacks, and he got hurt like Thanksgiving. Like he had 6 games left to play, where he could have easily had 15 plus sacks. And we saw what Jalen Carter did with people comparing him to Aaron Donald in just his second season in the NFL. So yeah, you got to beef up the interior offensive line. I need bigger guys. I need meaner guys. I need nastier guys. And while I think that Sam Cosmi, if he returns to his 2023 form, gives you a solid player there, I don't think that Sam Cosmi is going to be available for the first half of the season. So you got to improve there, especially if we get the New York Giants front and the Philadelphia Eagles front scheduled to us early in the season. Moving on to number 2 on our list. And some of you guys are going to hate me for this take. Some of you guys might love me for this take. But if you've been following the channel, you know this is a take that I've had for a while. This isn't necessarily a hot take to me. But number 2 on this list, and a position that I think that we so direly need, that we're in dire need of, and that's an elite, dynamic running back 1. We need a starting running back because we don't have a starting running back on this roster right now. We need a dynamic running back that can make something out of nothing. Because as I just touched on with that interior O-line, yeah, they weren't creating massive holes. They weren't. But I see too many backs in this league make something out of nothing, make chicken salad out of chicken scratch over and over again. And we don't have that on the roster right now. Austin Eckler, if this was a couple of years ago, might have been able to be that guy. But he needs manufactured space to kind of make guys missing space at this point in his career, which is understandable. This guy's over 30 years old. But the main culprit in this thing, and the biggest reason why I think that we don't have a starting running back on this roster is Brian. Y'all know we call him Brian over here. The artist formerly known as B-Rob, because we stripped him of his nickname. Brian Robinson not it, bro. He's not it. Has a great feel-good story. Nice hard runner. But I've said it before on this channel, and I'll say it again. If he is on the roster in the 2025 season, I don't want Brian Robinson to be relegated to more than just goal line running back duty. I don't want him getting any touches outside of the 5-yard line going into the end zone. I don't, because Brian Robinson, he's just not that guy. He's just not that guy. If you didn't see that over the course of this second half of the season, I don't know what to tell you. Take the burgundy and go get tinted lenses off. Take the burgundy and go tinted lenses off. Because as I said at the beginning of this episode, my intentions going into this offseason is to compete with the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't see how we went up against Saquon Barkley 3 times this season. We witnessed Saquon Barkley 3 times this season. And some of the people in the Washington Commanders community still think Brian Robinson is the answer. No, I'm not saying it's only one of Saquon in the world. He's a fucking freakazoid. But there's 50 Brian Robinsons running around here. I promise you. It's levels to this. It's so many levels. And there's so many levels in between a guy like Saquon Barkley and a guy like Brian Robinson. Shit, Tyrone Tracy for the Giants had a 1,000-yard season. We have yet to see that from Brian Robinson yet. As I mentioned before, I don't know what it has to do with the shooting, but he slows down over the course of the year. The Brian Robinson in September is never the Brian Robinson in December and January. And it's time that we get more dynamic at this position. Because while the 17 and 18 play drives that we started to become so accustomed to, because Jalen Daniels is the most cerebral dude on the planet, you don't want to make your bread and butter on that. You want to have a couple of 4 or 5 play drives, explosives where you have a margin for error because you're not out there on the field for 20 plays where you have a chance to give up the ball and turn the ball over each and every snap. As I've said before, I need guys that can hit their head on the goalpost, whether they come from the wide receiver room or the running back room. I need guys that's going to take advantage of the space that they're going to get playing with Jalen Daniels. We saw teams use 2 spies on Jalen Daniels in the playoffs. So guess what? Guess what that does when the team uses 2 spies? That tends to take a guy away from a check down route. But if we threw Brian Robinson a 2-yard check down route, the most it was going for was 4 yards. I need a Jahmyr Gibbs. And we got backs like Travion Henderson, Dylan Sampson, as I mentioned with the defensive tackle room. The football guys, they listen to the Washington Commanders. Or they're on the Washington Commanders side because 2 of the positions that I've mentioned on this list have a filth of riches in the 2025 draft. And that's the interior defensive tackle position and that's the running back position. So if you don't come out of this draft, if you don't come out of the 2025 draft weekend with a starting running back and with an upgrade over Brian Robinson Jr., that might be the first time that I start to question Adam Peters. Shit, we heard Dan Quinn just say during the playoffs that he wanted Bucky Irvin last year. So we were looking to upgrade at the position last year. So there's shouldn't be any reason why we're not looking to do it now. Where I think the talent pool at the position is deeper than it was last season. And I think that Brian Robinson has given us less faith going into this offseason than he did even last season. And that might be a hot take. Don't kill the messenger because I know some of y'all love Brian for his story and everything else. Great guy, decent player. I don't want to put the great player label. I'm throwing that around too loosely, but I'm trying to compete with the Philadelphia Eagles. And last but not least, the number 1 position of need for our beloved Washington Commanders going into the 2025 season is defensive end edge rush defender. Is an edge, whether that be an outside linebacker, whether that be a defensive end. We need a dominant edge. One of the biggest reasons why I'm saying trade the farm for Myles Garrett, I don't care if he's 35 years old, he's still dominant. We need a dominant edge. We need a dominant edge to not only compete with the Philadelphia Eagles, but we need a dominant edge just simply because all good defenses need a dominant edge. And we need an edge that can not only supply pressure, because as I mentioned throughout this episode, I feel like a lot of our sacks were manufactured because Joe Witt had to dig into his duffel bag. But we need a guy that can not only, get quarterback pressure, but can hold up the edge in the run game as well. Yeah, our run defense was putrid, but one of the reasons why defensive tackle wasn't higher on my list and one of the reasons why edge is higher is because most of our big runs came on the edges because we didn't have defensive ends that could hold up on the point of attack, that could set an edge. And we didn't have linebackers that could run sideline to sideline. Go look at the tape. If I'm lying, I'm flying. If I'm lying, I'm flying. And when I said I want to compete with the Philadelphia Eagles, what did the Philadelphia Eagles do all season? What did they do in, the worst game that Jalen Daniels played in his career this far, in that Thursday night football game that we played against the Philadelphia Eagles? And what did they do against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs? Shit, what did they do all season? They rushed 4, and they were able to get to the quarterback with just 4, so they were able to sit 7 and 8 in coverage and confuse quarterbacks. So this is why you need a dominant edge. And the Eagles don't necessarily have a dominant edge, but they have a dominant defensive tackle that creates one-on-one matchups for their edges. And then they have edges that can win those one-on-one matchups, like a Nolan Smith, who just very well might be dominant come this time next year. Like a Josh Sweat. Their edges hold up in the run game as well. So whether it be Myles Garrett, whether it be Trey Hendrickson, whether it be Max Crosby, The edge position is what you go big game hunting for during the 2025 offseason. That's where you go OG Dan Snyder, dropping the bag, name your price, giving them a blank check. That's the position that you do it for. That's who you trade the farm for. Is an edge defender. Because I think if we honest to God, I know we got belt to ass in the Super Bowl. And I might lose all the credibility that I built up over this over 30-minute video with this statement. But I think if we had a dominant edge on the 2024 Washington Commanders, I think I might have been celebrating on Constitution Avenue last week. Celebrating the Super Bowl parade. Celebrating the Super Bowl championship. I wholeheartedly believe that. But that'll do it for this list, man. And that'll do it for this episode. Let us know what y'all thought of our list. Let us know. Did y'all like our list? Do you agree with our list? Would you shift some positions on our list? Did some positions not make our list that would make your list? Did some positions make our list that you wouldn't even touch on your list? Infiltrate that comment section. Let us know. We love chopping it up with you guys. Hit that subscribe button so you're not missing any content because it's Combine week, so you know content coming. I might do a reaction video reacting to some 40s, giving some of the prospects that I like going to Combine week. We got a lot of content coming over here at Bleeding Mean G, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you're not missing it. Thank you guys for tuning into this episode. As always, if you're listening to us on audio-only platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating, please leave a review. That's how we finesse these algorithms so that when you're searching anything Washington Commanders, Bleeding BNG, that #1 content hub that pops up in your search bar. If you're not following us on social media, what are you doing? What are you doing? Our Instagram is at Bleeding BNG, BLEEDING BNG. So there's 2 G's in our Instagram handle, and our X handle is spelled a tad bit different. That one's Bleeding BNG, BLEEDIN BNG. So there's only 1 G in our X handle. Go ahead, follow us on X. We over there cutting up every day. And yeah, doing what we love. Thank you guys for tuning into this video. I'll check in on you guys on the flip side.